The day began like any other. He woke up early, before the sun rose, and did the small tasks he always did. He fed the few animals he had, checked the fence lines, and made himself a simple breakfast. He lived alone on a piece of land far from town. There were no neighbors nearby, only open desert and distant hills. He liked the quiet. He liked the fact that no one asked him questions. But that morning, the quiet felt different. It was heavier, like the air was waiting for something. He was driving down the long, empty road when he saw the first sign of trouble. A small vehicle was stopped on the side of the road. Smoke rose from the hood, and the driver's door was open. A woman stood near the car, her face turned toward the desert as if she was listening for something. Her child sat on the ground, hugging his knees. He slowed down and pulled over, though he knew it could be dangerous. There was a part of him that wanted to keep driving, to stay safe in his own world. But he couldn't ignore a person in need. That was not who he was. The woman looked at him quickly, then looked away. Her eyes were tired, and her hands shook. She did not speak. She only stood there, watching the empty land, as if she expected someone to appear out of nowhere. He stepped out of his truck and walked toward them carefully. He kept his hands visible, and he spoke softly, so he would not frighten them.
"Are you okay?" "Hog," he asked. The woman did not answer right away.
She seemed to be deciding whether he was a threat. The child looked up at him, his face expressionless. The boy did not look like a child who had been crying, but he also did not look like a child who felt safe. Finally, the woman spoke. Her voice was quiet and her words came slowly. "We need help," she said. That was all, but it was enough. He noticed the woman's clothing. It was simple and worn. Her hair was messy, as if she had been traveling for days. The child's shoes were too small for his feet, and his clothes were dusty. It was clear they had been on the move. He offered to call for assistance, but she shook her head quickly. Her eyes flashed with fear. "No," she said. "Please, no." He understood. She did not want to involve the police or anyone official. Maybe she was afraid of being separated from her child. Maybe she had had bad experiences before. He did not know. But he respected her fear. He could have left them there. He could have driven away and pretended he never saw them. It would have been safer. It would have kept his life simple. But he could not do that. He looked at the child again. The boy was watching him carefully, like he was trying to understand whether this man would hurt them or help them. The child did not smile. He did not speak. He only watched. The woman stepped closer to him and whispered, "Please, we just need a place to stay for a while." She looked at him with tired eyes, and in that moment he saw something that touched him deeply. It was not just fear. It was a mother's desperate need to protect her child. He thought about his own life. He had lived alone for years. He had no family nearby. He had no one who depended on him. His life was simple because he chose it that way. He could leave whenever he wanted. He could go to town, buy supplies, and return to his quiet home. But this woman and her child did not have that choice. They had no safe place, no one to turn to, no one to trust. He took a deep breath and said, "Come with me." The woman hesitated for a moment as if she expected him to change his mind. Then she nodded. He helped them into his truck. The child climbed in silently, holding his small bag close to his chest. The woman sat beside him, her hands resting on her knees. She did not look at him. She stared straight ahead. On the drive back to his property, he tried to speak gently. "What happened?" he asked. The woman did not answer. She only shook her head slightly. It was clear she did not want to talk about it. He understood. Some stories are too heavy to share. When they arrived at his home, he led them inside. He showed them where they could rest. He gave the child water and a small snack. He offered the woman a blanket. She sat down slowly, as if her body was exhausted from carrying fear for too long. She looked at him once, and her eyes seemed to ask a question without words. He did not know what to say. He did not want to ask too many questions. He did not want to push her into sharing more than she was ready to share. He only said, "You can stay here for now. I will help you." She nodded again. It was a small movement, but it was full of relief. That night, he could not sleep. He kept thinking about the choice he had made. He had hidden them. He had brought them to his home without knowing their story, without knowing the risks. He had done it because he could not ignore a mother and her child in need, but he also knew that hiding them was dangerous. If anyone found out, he could get into trouble. He could lose everything. His life would change in a way he could not predict. He thought about the woman's fear. He thought about the possibility that someone might come looking for them. He thought about what it meant to be alone in a world that did not always care. He also thought about the child. He wondered what kind of life the boy had lived before. He wondered what he had seen. The child's silence was powerful. It was not the silence of someone who was calm. It was the silence of someone who had learned that speaking could be dangerous. The next morning, he woke early again. He did not want to wake the woman and the child, but he knew he needed to plan. He went outside and checked his property. He looked for places where someone could hide or where someone could easily see his house. He made sure the fences were strong. He checked the water supply. He prepared food. He returned inside and found the woman in the kitchen, quietly making tea. She did not look at him. She moved carefully, like she did not want to draw attention to herself. The child sat at the table, still holding his bag. He looked tired, but he seemed slightly calmer. He ate slowly, as if he was trying to remember what it felt like to eat without fear. The man did not want to frighten them, but he needed to ask some questions. "Do you have family?" he asked gently. The woman paused. She looked at him, and her eyes showed a mix of sadness and shame. She shook her head. "No," she said, "not here." He nodded. He understood. She had no one to turn to. She had no safe place to go. He thought about the idea of taking them to town. He thought about asking for help, but he knew the woman would not agree. She had already shown that she did not trust anyone. He realized he had to make a decision. He could offer them help and then send them away, or he could keep them here, hidden, and hope no one came looking. He did not know if he was strong enough to do it, but he also knew that he could not turn his back. He spent the day quietly helping them. He repaired a small room in his house so they would have privacy. He cleaned and organized. He bought extra supplies from his own stock. He made sure they had enough water. The woman watched him carefully. She did not speak much, but she seemed to be watching his actions more than listening to his words. There was something in her that made him feel responsible, not because he wanted to be responsible, but because he could not ignore what he had done. By evening, the woman finally spoke more openly. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I did not mean to cause trouble." He shook his head. "You did not cause trouble. You were in trouble." She looked at him for the first time, and her eyes were full of emotion. "I am scared," she said. "I don't know what to do." He did not have a perfect answer. He did not have a solution. He only had the truth. "I don't know either," he said, "but you are safe here for now." She nodded, and for the first time, she seemed to relax slightly. It was a small moment, but it meant a lot. The child sat quietly, listening to them. He did not speak, but he seemed to understand that something had changed. He looked at the man with a different kind of curiosity now, not fear. That night, the man lay in bed and listened to the quiet of the desert. He could hear the wind outside, the distant call of an animal, the sound of his own thoughts. He realized that his life had already changed. He had made a choice. He had chosen to help. Now he had to live with the consequences. And he knew deep down that the days ahead would not be simple. The next morning, the man woke before sunrise again. He had begun to think about the woman and the child as part of his daily life, even though he had not meant for it to happen. The quiet of his home felt different now. It was not just his quiet. It was shared quiet, filled with the small sounds of other people living there. He went outside and checked the fences again. The desert was calm, but his mind was not. He wondered if someone would come looking for the woman. He wondered if he was doing the right thing. He wondered if he was becoming too involved. When he returned inside, he found the woman sitting at the table. The child was next to her, staring at the window. He looked at the sky, as if he wanted to know what kind of world existed outside this small house. The woman looked at him and spoke softly. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He did not want to make a big deal out of it. He did not want her to feel like she owed him something. But he also knew she was grateful, and he could see it in her eyes. "You can stay," he said again, "as long as you need." She nodded, but her eyes were distant. It was clear she was thinking about something else. He did not press her. He spent the morning doing chores and helping where he could. He did not want to overwhelm them, but he wanted to show them that he was reliable. He wanted them to feel safe. He wanted to prove that his offer was not temporary. As the day went on, the woman began to open up slightly. Not about her whole story, but about small parts. She spoke in short sentences, careful not to reveal too much.
"My name is Lila,"
she said. The man nodded. "I'm Mark," he replied. The child did not speak. He only looked at the man with careful eyes. Lila continued. "We were running. We had to leave. It was not safe." Mark did not ask for details. He could tell she did not want to relive whatever had happened. He simply listened. He could see that Lila was not used to being cared for. She had always been the one who had to take care of others. She was not used to trusting someone else. Mark gave her space, but he also tried to help. He fixed the small heater in the room where they slept. He brought more blankets. He made sure the child had fresh water. The child, whose name Mark learned was Noah, started to move around the house more. He was still quiet, but he was less tense. He began to look at the things in the house with interest, not fear. Mark noticed that Noah liked to draw. He found a small notebook and some pencils, and he left them on the table. He did not tell Noah to draw. He simply placed the items where the child could see them. The next day, Noah drew a picture. It was a simple drawing of a house with a sun above it. The lines were shaky, but the drawing was clear. It was not just a drawing. It was a message. Mark did not say anything at first. He just looked at the picture. He could feel the weight of it. A house, a sun, a place that felt safe. Mark put the drawing on the refrigerator. He wanted Noah to know that he saw it, and that it mattered. Lila noticed the drawing too. She looked at it for a long time. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She only breathed deeply and nodded. That evening, Mark made dinner. He cooked simple food. He did not want to impress them with fancy meals. He just wanted them to feel normal. They ate together quietly. It was not a happy dinner, but it was calm. It was the kind of calm that comes when people feel safe enough to sit and eat without rushing. After dinner, Lila spoke again. "How long will you help us?" she asked. Mark paused. He had not expected the question to come so soon. "I don't know," he said honestly. "As long as you need." Lila looked at him carefully. She seemed to be measuring his words. She seemed to want to know if he meant what he said. "I don't want to be a burden," she said quietly. Mark shook his head. "You're not a burden," he said. "I can help." Lila nodded, but she did not look convinced. She was not used to receiving help without paying a price. She was not used to trusting. Mark realized that he had to be patient. He could not force trust. He had to earn it. The next day, Mark decided to take them to the nearby river. He knew the area well. He knew the river was calm and quiet. He thought it might be good for Noah to see water and feel the sun. It might help him feel less trapped. Lila agreed, but she looked nervous. She kept looking around as if she expected someone to appear from behind a tree. She held Noah's hand tightly. When they arrived at the river, Noah ran ahead, laughing softly. It was the first time Mark heard him laugh. The sound was quiet, but it felt like a gift. Lila watched him with a gentle smile. It was the first time Mark saw her smile since she arrived. It was small, but it was real. They stayed by the river for a while. Mark sat on a rock, watching them. He could see the tension slowly leaving their bodies. It was a small moment, but it mattered. On the way back home, Lila spoke again. "I want to thank you," she said. Mark nodded. "You already did," he replied. Lila hesitated. Then she said something that surprised him. "I don't want to leave," she said. Mark looked at her. He did not know how to respond. He had expected her to want to leave soon, to find a new place, to continue moving. But she said she did not want to leave. She continued, "I am tired. I am tired of running. I want a place where I can stay." Mark felt his heart tighten. He understood. He understood the meaning of her words. She was not only talking about a house.
She was talking about safety. She was talking about a life that was not always in danger.
Mark did not respond immediately. He wanted to choose his words carefully. He did not want to give her false hope. "I can't promise forever," he said softly. "But you can stay here for now." Lila nodded. She looked at him with a mix of gratitude and sadness. It was clear that she wanted to believe him, but she was also afraid. As the days passed, their lives became more routine. They had quiet mornings and calm evenings. Mark continued to help them with chores. Lila began to cook with him sometimes. Noah began to help with small tasks, like bringing water or feeding the animals. Mark noticed that Lila had a strong sense of responsibility. She did not want to depend on him. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to contribute. She did not want to feel like a burden. Mark respected that. He encouraged her. He asked her to help with the house. And she did. It was not easy. They had no idea what the future would bring, but they were slowly building a small life together. One night, Mark sat outside on his porch and looked at the stars. He could see the sky clearly because there were no city lights. The desert felt calm, but Mark's thoughts were not calm. He wondered how long he could keep them hidden. He wondered if someone would come looking for them. He wondered what would happen if they were found. He also wondered about his own feelings. He had not expected to care so much. He had not expected to feel protective. He had not expected to feel like this was his responsibility now, but it was. He had chosen it, and now he had to live with it. The days moved forward in a slow, quiet way. Mark woke up early, and the house had already become a place where more than one person lived. He had started to think about the woman and the child as part of his life, even though he still did not know much about them. Lila was becoming more comfortable in the house. She began to help with chores, not because Mark asked, but because she wanted to. It was her way of showing gratitude. She wanted to feel useful. She wanted to feel like she belonged. Noah was also changing. He still did not speak much, but his eyes looked brighter. He would sometimes smile when Mark spoke to him gently. He would sometimes ask small questions, like, "Can I help?" or "Is it safe?" It was clear he was learning what safety felt like. One morning, Mark found Lila sitting outside looking at the horizon. She was holding a small piece of cloth in her hands. Mark did not want to interrupt her, but he also wanted to be there for her. He sat down beside her. She did not speak at first. She simply stared at the empty land. After a while, she said softly, "I am not from here." Mark nodded. He already knew that, but he wanted her to feel comfortable sharing. "I am from a different place," she continued. "My people have lived there for a long time. But we were pushed away. We had to leave."
Mark listened. Irene.
He did not interrupt. He could see the pain in her eyes, but she did not cry. She was the kind of person who carried her feelings quietly. Mark did not know much about her culture, but he knew enough to understand that she had a deep connection to her land. He knew that being forced to leave was not only a physical loss, but also an emotional one. It was like losing a part of herself. Lila continued, "I have learned to survive. I have learned to keep going. But I have never learned to trust." Mark understood. He knew that trust is something people learn slowly, and only when they feel safe. He looked at her and said, "You can trust me?" Lila looked at him for a moment. Then she shook her head slightly. "I want to," she said, "but it is hard." Mark nodded. He did not push her. He knew trust could not be forced. He stayed quiet for a while, letting her thoughts settle. Then he said, "I know you are scared, but you are safe here." Lila's eyes moved away from the horizon. She looked at him, and for the first time, she seemed to show a small sign of hope. "Thank you," she whispered. Mark did not respond with words. He simply reached out and placed his hand on hers for a moment. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. It was a silent promise that he would be there. As the weeks passed, Mark began to notice something else. Lila was becoming more than just a guest in his home. She was becoming part of the daily routine. She was making the house feel warmer. She was making it feel like a home. Mark also noticed that Noah was changing in small ways. He began to sleep better. He began to eat more. He began to play quietly in the yard. He would sometimes follow Mark while he worked, watching him as if he wanted to learn how to live. One afternoon, Mark took Noah to the nearby town to buy supplies. He wanted Noah to see the world outside the house, but he also wanted to be careful. He wanted to make sure they did not draw attention to themselves. In the store, Noah stayed close to Mark. He held Mark's hand tightly. He looked at the shelves with wide eyes. He seemed both curious and nervous. Mark bought food and some simple items. He did not buy anything expensive. He did not want to attract attention. He wanted to keep their life simple and quiet. On the drive back, Noah asked a question that surprised Mark.
"Do you have family?" Noah asked.
Mark was quiet for a moment. He did not want to lie. He also did not want to make the child feel sad. "I used to," he said softly, "but they are not here anymore." Noah nodded. He did not ask more. He seemed to understand. Mark realized that the child had a deep understanding of loss. Noah was not a child who had been spoiled with love and comfort. He was a child who had learned to survive. When they returned home, Lila was waiting outside. She looked at Noah and smiled softly. She seemed relieved to see him safe. That night, Lila spoke again. "You are kind," she said to Mark. Mark felt a mix of emotions. He did not want to feel proud because he knew he was simply doing what he believed was right. But he also felt the warmth of her words. "You are not just kind," she continued. "You are patient. You do not rush me." Mark nodded. He knew patience was important. He knew that Lila had been through a lot, and she needed time. Then Lila said something that made Mark feel uneasy. "I want to stay," she said. "Not just for a little time." Mark paused. He did not expect her to say it so clearly. Lila continued, "I want to stay because I am tired of running. I want a place where I do not have to move again." Mark looked at her. He understood. He also felt the weight of her words. "I can't promise forever," he said gently, "but you can stay as long as you need." Lila nodded, but she looked sad. It was clear she wanted more than just a promise. Mark did not know how to respond. He did not want to give her false hope. He did not want to make her feel like she had to leave soon, but he also did not want to promise something he could not guarantee. The next day, Mark noticed that Lila was acting differently. She was quieter. She seemed lost in her thoughts. He could tell something was on her mind. That evening after dinner, she asked Mark to sit with her. They sat outside on the porch, watching the sunset. Lila took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "I need to tell you something," she said. Mark listened carefully. He felt his heart beat faster. He did not know what she would say. Lila continued, "I have been thinking. I want to build a life here, but I don't know how to do it alone." Mark looked at her. He could feel the seriousness of her words. She was not speaking casually. She was speaking from the heart. Lila continued, "I need a partner, someone who will stay. Someone who will help me, someone who will be with us." Mark was quiet. He did not want to respond quickly. He wanted to understand. Lila looked at him with steady eyes. "I am not asking for love," she said. "I am asking for stability." Mark felt a mix of emotions. He felt a sense of responsibility. He felt a sense of fear. He felt a sense of confusion. He did not know what to say. He did not want to hurt her. He also did not want to make a decision without thinking. He finally said, "I can't promise anything yet. I need time." Lila nodded. She looked down at her hands. "I understand," she said. Mark realized that this was a turning point. He had not expected to be asked for such a serious commitment. He had not expected to be asked to become part of their family. He knew that if he said yes, his life would change completely. He would no longer be a man who lived alone. He would become a father figure. He would become a partner. He would become responsible for two lives, not just his own. He also knew that if he said no, he would hurt Lila deeply. He would leave her alone again. He would send her back into the world where she had to run. Mark sat quietly, thinking. He looked at the darkening sky. He felt the weight of his choice. He did not answer that night. He wanted to be sure. The next morning, He woke early again. He watched the sunrise. He thought about Lila's words. He thought about Noah's silent eyes. He thought about the life he had built alone. He realized that he had already changed. He had already become part of their lives. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if he was ready for such a commitment, but he knew that he could not ignore the truth. He had to decide soon. Mark woke early, as he always did. The desert was quiet, and the air felt cool. He sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise. He had been thinking about Lila's words all night. He had been thinking about what she had asked. He had been thinking about the life he had known and the life he might have to build. He knew the question was not simple. Lila was not asking him for a small favor. She was asking him to become a permanent part of her life and Noah's life. She was asking him to stay forever. Mark had always lived alone. He had built a life that was quiet and simple. He liked his routines. He liked the freedom. He liked not having to answer to anyone. He liked not being responsible for anyone else. But now the idea of returning to that life felt strange. It felt like going back to a place he no longer belonged. He got up and went inside. Lila was already awake. She was in the kitchen, making tea. Noah sat at the table, drawing quietly. He looked up when Mark entered, and his eyes showed a calmness that Mark had not seen before. Mark sat down at the table, and he watched him for a moment. He felt a warmth in his chest. It was not romantic love, but something deeper and quieter. It was the feeling of belonging. It was the feeling of being needed. Lila looked at him. She did not say anything. She waited for him to speak. Mark took a deep breath and said, "I need to know why you are asking me to stay." Lila nodded. She seemed prepared. She had been thinking about this for a long time. "I want to stop running," she said. "I want a stable life. I want Noah to grow up without fear. I want to know that we have a place to stay." Mark listened. He understood. He could feel the weight of her words. He could feel the fear behind them. Lila continued, "I have been through a lot. I don't want to go through it again. I want someone who will be there, someone who will not leave." Mark looked at her. He saw the sadness in her eyes. He saw the strength too. She was not asking for something easy. She was asking for something real. Mark said, "I understand, but I need to know if you are asking because you want me or because you are scared." Lila paused. She looked down at her hands. She took a deep breath. "I am asking because I am scared," she admitted. "But I am also asking because I trust you. I trust you more than anyone else." Mark felt his heart tighten. He had never been trusted like that before. He had never had someone depend on him so openly. He did not want to disappoint her. He did not want to fail. He looked at Noah. Noah was still drawing. He seemed calm. He seemed safe. Mark thought about what it would mean to stay. It would mean giving up his freedom. It would mean being responsible for two people. It would mean building a life he had never planned for. He also thought about what it would mean to leave. It would mean sending Lila and Noah back into the world where they were not safe. It would mean leaving them alone again. Mark felt a strong sense of guilt. He had already brought them into his life. He had already made a choice. He could not undo that choice easily. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the desert. The land was calm and open. It was beautiful, but it was also empty. It was a place where a person could feel alone. Mark turned back to Lila. "I need time," he said. I can't decide right now. Lila nodded. She did not look angry. She did not look disappointed. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been waiting for an answer for a long time. I understand, she said quietly, but please don't take too long. Mark nodded. He knew she was right. That day, Mark spent his time thinking. He went through his usual chores, but his mind was not fully there. He kept thinking about the future. He kept thinking about what he was willing to give up. He realized that the life he had built alone was not as perfect as he had thought. He had been lonely for a long time. He had not admitted it to himself, but he had felt the emptiness. He had filled his days with work, but the silence was always there. Now, with Lila and Noah, the silence was gone. The house felt alive. The quiet was not empty anymore. It was filled with small sounds. Noah's footsteps, Lila's soft breathing, the sound of dishes being washed. Mark began to feel something he had not felt in a long time. He began to feel a sense of purpose, but he also felt fear. He was afraid of failing them. He was afraid of not being enough. He was afraid of being responsible for someone else's happiness. That night, Mark sat outside again. The sky was full of stars. The desert was quiet. He thought about what Lila had asked. He thought about the future. He thought about his life. He realized that he could not keep living the way he had been living. He could not go back to being alone. He could not pretend that he did not care. He also realized that staying would not be easy, but it would require sacrifice. It would require change. It would require him to become someone different. But he also realized that he had already changed. He had already started caring. He had already started feeling responsible. He went inside and found Lila still awake. She was sitting at the table looking at a small photo she had found in her bag. It was a picture of her family from before she left. She looked at it quietly, as if she was remembering a time that felt far away. Mark sat beside her. He did not touch her, but he sat close enough that she could feel his presence. Lila looked at him and said softly, "I know you are thinking about it." Mark nodded. Lila continued, "I know this is a big decision. I know you are scared. But I want you to know something."
Mark waited. Lila said, "I don't want to force you." Okakron dotted Nembari.
"I don't want you to stay because you feel sorry for us. I want you to stay because you want to." Mark felt a strong emotion in his chest. He felt a deep respect for her honesty. He felt a deep respect for her strength. He took a deep breath and said, "I don't know if I can promise forever, but I know I want to try." Lila looked at him. Her eyes softened. She nodded slowly. She did not smile, but there was a small relief in her face. Mark continued, "I want to try because I see how much you have been through. I want to try because Noah deserves a stable life. And I want to try because I don't want to go back to the silence." Lila looked at him, and for the first time she seemed truly hopeful. She reached out and took his hand. She held it gently, as if she was afraid it might disappear. Mark felt the weight of her hand. He felt the responsibility. He felt the connection. He knew that saying yes was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. He also knew that he had to be honest with himself. He had to accept that this decision would change his life in ways he could not predict, but he was ready to try. That night, they both slept, not because everything was solved, but because they had made a small step forward. They had shared a truth. They had made a choice to try. The next morning, Mark woke up with a different feeling. He felt more certain. He felt more focused. He felt like he had a purpose. He went outside and began his work. He felt the sun on his face. He felt the land under his feet. He felt the life he was building. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if he could keep his promise. He did not know if he could be the person Lila needed. But he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer alone. After the conversation, the house felt different. It was not just a house anymore. It was a place where 3 lives had begun to connect. Mark still felt nervous, but the nervousness was not the same as before. It was a nervousness that came from hope. It was a nervousness that came from responsibility. Mark woke up early as usual. He walked outside and looked at the land. He felt a strange mix of peace and worry. He knew he had made a choice, but he also knew that choices are not the end. They are the start of a new path. He went inside, and Lila was already awake. She was preparing breakfast. Noah sat at the table, drawing quietly. Mark noticed that Noah's drawing had changed. The picture was no longer just a house. It now showed 3 figures. One was small, one was medium, and one was taller. They stood together, holding hands. The sun was shining above them. Mark felt a strong emotion. He did not know if it was joy or fear. It was both. He sat down at the table. He looked at Lila. "Is he drawing us?" he asked. Lila smiled softly. "Yes," she said.
He is learning what family looks like. Mark nodded. He felt a warmth in his chest.
He felt the weight of what he had agreed to. He knew that he had to be careful. He knew that he had to be responsible. After breakfast, Mark decided to take them to a place he had never taken anyone before. He wanted them to see the world outside the house. He wanted them to feel the open land. He wanted them to know that they were safe. They drove to a nearby hill that overlooked the desert. It was a quiet place, far from roads and people. Mark had come there many times when he needed to think. He thought it might be a good place for Lila and Noah, too. They climbed to the top of the hill. The view was wide and beautiful. The sky looked endless. Lila stood quietly, taking it in. Noah looked around with wide eyes. Mark watched them. He felt a sense of calm. He felt like he was finally giving them something they had not had in a long time. Peace. Lila spoke softly. "This place is beautiful," she said. Mark nodded. "It is," he replied. They stood there for a while, just enjoying the silence. It was the kind of silence that did not feel empty. It was a silence filled with safety. After a while, Lila turned to Mark and said, "I want to ask you something." Mark looked at her.
"What is it?"
Lila took a deep breath. She looked at him carefully, as if she wanted to make sure he understood her. "I want to have another child," she said. Mark's heart stopped for a moment. He did not expect her to say it so directly. He felt a mix of emotions. He felt surprised, worried, and strangely hopeful. Lila continued, "Not right now, but someday, when we are ready." Mark did not respond immediately. He looked at her, trying to understand. He could see the meaning behind her words. She was not asking for a romantic promise. She was asking for a life that would continue. She was asking for a future. Mark thought about it. He thought about the responsibilities. He thought about the love he already felt for Noah. He thought about the possibility of having another child and what that would mean for him. He thought about the fact that he had never planned for a family. He had never thought about being a father. He had never thought about being someone's partner. He had never thought about a life that included others. But he also thought about the quiet moments, the moments when Noah smiled, the moments when Lila looked at him with trust. the moments when he felt like he was part of something. He realized that the idea of having another child did not scare him as much as he expected. It scared him in a different way. It scared him because it meant he had to be brave in a new way. It meant he had to stay. It meant he had to continue being responsible. Mark finally spoke.
"I need time to think about that too," he said. Lila nodded.
She looked calm. She seemed to understand that it was a big decision. Mark continued, "But I am not leaving. I am staying." Lila's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. They stayed on the hill for a while longer. The sun began to set. The sky turned orange and pink. Mark felt a deep sense of peace. He felt like he was finally living a life that mattered. When they returned home, they continued their routine. The days were not always easy. There were small problems. There were moments of worry. There were moments when Mark felt unsure if he was doing the right thing. There were moments when Lila felt tired and afraid. But they were together, and that made the hard moments easier. One day, a neighbor drove by and stopped near Mark's property. The neighbor was an older man who had lived in the area for many years. He had noticed Mark's truck and had wondered who was visiting. Mark felt a small panic. He did not want anyone to know. He did not want questions. He did not want to risk their safety. The neighbor walked up and smiled. "Hey, Mark," he said. "I haven't seen you around lately. Everything okay?" Mark smiled back. He kept his voice calm. "Yeah," he said. "Just been busy." The neighbor looked around. He saw Lila and Noah in the yard. He looked at them carefully. He asked, "Who are they?" Mark felt his heart beat faster. He did not want to lie. He did not want to tell the truth. He did not want to bring attention to them. Mark took a deep breath and said, "They are family." The neighbor nodded. He smiled. "Good," he said. "It's good to see you not alone." Mark felt a mix of relief and fear. He was relieved that the neighbor did not ask more questions. He was afraid that this could lead to more attention. He knew that their safety depended on staying quiet. He knew that he had to be careful, but he also realized that he could not live in constant fear. He could not hide forever. He began to think about the future. He began to think about what they would do if someone asked questions again. He began to think about how to make their life stable. Mark started to plan. He talked to Lila about simple steps they could take. He talked to her about what they could do if they needed to move again. He talked to her about how to stay safe while still living openly. Lila listened. She trusted him. She knew he was trying to protect them. Mark also began to think about his own life. He began to think about his dreams. He began to think about what he wanted to do now that he was not alone. He realized that he wanted to build something with Lila. He wanted to build a home. He wanted to build a future. He wanted to be someone who mattered. One night, Mark sat with Lila and Noah and talked about their plans. He told them that he would stay. He told them that he would do his best to keep them safe. He told them that he wanted to build a life with them. Lila looked at him with tears in her eyes. She held Noah close. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her face showed everything. Mark felt a deep sense of calm. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. He knew there would be challenges, but he also knew that they would face them together. He had made a choice. He had chosen to stay, and now he would live with that choice every day. The desert outside was still quiet. The stars still shone. But inside the house, there was warmth. There was trust. There was a sense of family. And that was something Mark had never expected to find. I hid an Apache mom and her child. Now she wants me to father the next one and stay forever.